So this game is an XCOM-like with roguelike elements. I'd call it a turn-based tactics game, but these kinds of games all seem to be aping XCOM Enemy Unknown to such a degree it would seem disingenuous in a way. They all do that XCOM 2 actions per turn and binary cover. That means each one of your characters can move once per turn and use one ability per turn. No 2 moves or 2 attacks in the same turn though. Not in this game anyway. And then the cover system works like this. Each cover tile projects a line sideways, and if your character is beyond that line, his target will be protected by that cover tile, given that they're sitting directly behind that cover tile. So your character could be on the line, and it could look like they have a clear shot past the cover tile at the target, but they will still get the hit chance deduction. So there's frequently an ostensible mismatch between what you see on screen and how the mechanics actually work. I remember when XCOM Enemy Unknown came out, I hadn't played the original series it was rebooted from, so my reference for the genre was Jagged Alliance 2, and in that game you didn't have 2 actions per turn. Instead, your characters had a budget of action points each turn that you could spend on all sorts and any number of actions. You could shoot multiple times with the same character, and you could spend more action points on individual shots for a higher chance to hit, and there was more depth to the gameplay in general. Your characters could crouch and go prone and sneak and stuff. Then I played the new XCOM and I was a little disappointed. I mean, it's fine, it's a lean type of game design, it works, but there isn't much depth or breadth, if you will, to go into, which I would prefer, even if not all possible playstyles and strategies are equally balanced. Anyway, I think it's great that the genre was picked up by indies as well. I just wish there was more variety to them. Or maybe there is now. I haven't played too many of those games. Now, with this game, Pathway, it feels kind of appropriate though, in that it feels like a small game. The scope is small, the levels are small, the story isn't all that wordy, so the session time seems small, and the game even looks small, what with the pixel graphics and the literally small characters. And what this small appearance conveys is a sense that it requires low intellectual and or low time investment to get into. And I've talked about this a little in my video about genres. And by intellectual investment, I mean having to get into the headspace where you're concerned with the world and the characters and the narrative, really. Like you do when you boot up a big RPG, you know? You get a sense of where you're at in the story and the little stories of the side quests and all that, and also where your character progression is at and all that stuff. And by time investment, I mean session time and overall playtime. I think generally people have a harder and harder time getting interested in high investment entertainment. People don't have the time, or they're preoccupied with serious life stuff, so they feel like it would be improper for them to invest mental resources in unimportant things like entertainment. I mean, I feel it myself. I always think I should be doing something more productive, even though playing games counts as research for me. And then the investment required to get into a game may well not be clear beforehand. So if you can't assess it from the promotional material, you might not bother anyway. What's funny is that the issue extends to movies and TV as well. Whenever I'm looking for a movie to watch, I put a lot of stuff on the watch list, but I rarely end up actually watching a movie, because having to get to know all the characters and their problems and then getting emotionally invested feels like work. But the time investment is quite clear and quite low at like 1.5 hours, right? And while we're talking time investment, that stuff can be deceptive, because you might judge a game to be low investment and still end up putting in hours and hours. That's what happened to me with this game. Even with games where the session time is more or less clear on account of the gameplay being divided into matches, like with, say, Hearthstone or any multiplayer FPS or whatever, you can still go, oh, what the hell, let's do one more. So then with those games, the intellectual investment is partitioned into matches, so that'll draw people in. So having your game project low investment may get people to actually play it, rather than presenting it as the next big epic RPG or the next big thing to take over all your free time, and then people go, nah, I'll save my dedication for a AAA title or something. And here's another angle in this idea. You can have a game that starts as low investment but grows into a high investment endeavor as the session goes on. The example I'm thinking of is Civilization, where you start with like 1 settler and 1 warrior, so you'll have a single city to manage for a while, and you will only have to interact with opponents once you meet them, so the game eases you in quite gently. And before you know it, you've spent all night going, let's just do one more turn. By the way, I'm not talking about casual versus hardcore games. If you ask me, casual means shallow, and hardcore means deep. roughly, when talking about games that can have some relation to the intellectual, emotional, and time investment that the player has to muster, but it's not the same thing quite. Again, a multiplayer FPS will generally have a low investment threshold, but may well be totally hardcore. So getting invested in a game experience is a necessity to enjoy it, and your players don't have infinite attention to give away. They may have the time, but not the mental energy to spend on your game, or vice versa. And if you're asking for emotional investment, you better be great at writing characters, right? I just think this is an aspect of game development we should be cognizant of. And it's not just a marketing issue. It's deeply related to the design of your game. How does your new player experience play out? How convenient is it to hop in, etc.? And how does all that stuff read to someone who's just looking at the store page? And one more thing, I have a feeling that a lack of voice acting also contributes to a low investment aesthetic. Weirdly enough, I still plan on voicing future projects because I think it's a net positive for the experience and it can make the trailer more engaging, but I'm now thinking it could scare people away too, like an obnoxious salesman at a market or something. Anyway, back to Pathway. It's a good little game. You have several campaigns of differing length to choose from. In those campaigns, you go from node to node on the world map, and on some nodes you get a little battle. So that partitions the gameplay nicely. You keep money, items, and character progression between campaigns, and you can unlock a bunch of characters, so there's a nice bit of meta progression. So thumbs up. Here's an ad for a game I made. Slasher's Keep is a first-person roguelike with a focus on melee combat and loot. It has randomly generated dungeons with orcs, mole rats, and other monsters to fight, lots of loot to find, and a drag-and-drop weapon crafting system. I made it all by my lonesome, and it's available for PC on Steam.